Welcome to City Cinematheque, where the art and pleasure of the movies are the subject of serious discussion. I'm your host, Jerry Carlson, and I teach film studies at the City College of the City University of New York. Today, as part of our celebration of the 25 years of Milestone Films, the great boutique distributor, we're screening the 2002 family drama from Bangladesh, TheClaybird. Directed by Tarek Masood, this film won a major prize at the Cannes Film Festival, and it's a prize it much deserved. It shows the drama of a family in the moment of the birth of the nation of Bangladesh. There's a lot to see in this film, there's a lot to talk about, and we have 30 minutes to do so after today's screening. Joining us will be one of my colleagues from the CUNY system, Professor Anupama Kapse of Queens College. Now, take this voyage to 40 years ago in Bangladesh in the film TheClaybird. Welcome back to City Cinematheque. I hope you've enjoyed this opportunity to see what I think is a major film from South Asia, and certainly one honored by the Cannes Film Festival. It's a film that's rich in its historical representation, in its cinematography, and in its performances. There's a lot to talk about, and I'm pleased to say, as usual, we have 30 minutes to do so. And today our guest is one of my colleagues from the CUNY system, Professor Anupama Kapse from Queens College. She is a specialist in the silent cinema, but with a particular interest more broadly in South Asian cinemas. I'm happy to be able to congratulate her because her recent book, Silent Cinema and the Politics of Space, was given an award by the Society for Cinema and Media Studies, the outfit that people like Anupama and I are members of for folks who study the history of cinema. So welcome to City Cinematheque, Anupama.
Thank you. Thank you, Jerry, for inviting me. Pleasure to be here.
Great. Let's talk, you know, the historical setting of this film, even though there's a plaque at the beginning of the film that points things out, may not be familiar to that many people who may have a deep appreciation of this film. So help us, you know, set a little bit the history of Bangladesh, when this film is taking place, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about the history of just cinema in Bangladesh itself. Then we'll get to the film.
Right. India, or the Indian subcontinent, as we call it, was, you know, one territory when the British were ruling India, and it's only in 1947 that the subcontinent was divided into India and Pakistan, and this is when both nations became independent. One part was Islamic, and Pakistan, in fact, was divided further into West Pakistan, which we now call Pakistan, and East Pakistan, which is Bangladesh.
Okay.
And what's really interesting is that unlike Pakistan, Bangladesh is actually a republic. And Masood, in his film TheClaybird, talks a lot. I mean, for him, it's very important that he foreground the gentler, more humanistic aspects of Islam. And he doesn't necessarily take the political view of the creation of the state. Rather, he favors, you know, the view of the nation as a, you know, as a Sufi nation. One of the characters, one of the teachers in the film, calls it a Sufi nation.
And what would that mean for somebody not so familiar with the diverse forms of Islam?
Sufism is a mystical tradition, and a lot of Sufism is, you know, it's very musical, and that's why music is so important in this film. And you know, viewers might remember that this film actually has no television. This is Masood drawing on his own experience of growing up in the 60s. The film is roughly set in the 60s and is leading up, you know, to the 70s. And the first elections are held, and Mujibur Rahman is elected to power. And that's the period that the film documents.
Okay.
And that's why you don't see television, you don't see any phones. The only thing you hear is a radio.
Well, but so he really goes out of his way to give us a sense that the birth of this, because this film is the birth of Bangladesh in its own way, is set in a certain way another time and another place, because certainly you know, there are major cities in Bangladesh, but it's still primarily a rural and agrarian country, and he sets it in that countryside in a relatively isolated village. And that's where I think your point about radio is so important, because you have this double sense of it both being isolated and timeless, and yet by this one thread of the mass media, you know, connected with not only what's happening in its own nation, but with modernity as it's manifesting itself in the region.
Right, right. It's very much a film about the birth of the Bangladeshi nation. This is a theme that Masood dealt with extensively in most of his documentaries. He's primarily a documentary filmmaker. This was his first feature film. And Muktir Gaan, which translates as Songs of Freedom, is a documentary he made in 1995, which is just a collection of songs about the birth of the nation.
Ah, okay. Well, I think you just brought up two very interesting points. I mean, one is his origins are in not in the artificial tradition and studio-bound tradition of the different cinemas of the subcontinent of India, with Bollywood being the most famous, and of course with Dhaka being the major city of East Pakistan and Bangladesh. The cinema is referred to as Dollywood.
Yes, yes. Yes.
But he's coming out of this tradition of the documentary that captures the material features of the culture as they existed, even when he has to recreate them. There's a wonderful story about the fact of how long it took them to find one of the boats.
Yes.
In the film, because they wanted everybody to have the experience of moving around and to capture that in the film.
Absolutely. I mean, that festival, the boat festival, is apparently held only once a year. And Masood and his wife, Catherine Masood, who's actually Chicago-born, they collaborated on the script for the film, and they worked very closely together. They had to film everything in one day. So location shooting is very important for Masood. He's also using primarily sort of non-actors, very much like Ray was, doing with Pather Panchali's Song of the Road, which is a major influence for this film. But I'd also like to mention another filmmaker who's not as well known. This is Ritik Ghatak, who was Ray's contemporary, much more melodramatic, in terms of the treatment and the style that he used in his films, but deeply preoccupied with partition, deeply preoccupied with the division of the subcontinent and how painful that was.
Well, and I think one of the things that happens, particularly when you're half a world away, as we are at this particular moment, one, over a period of time, that pain can be lost by distance or forgotten, and he wants to recover that, which is a highly noble thing. But then also it becomes more convenient to, in a certain sense, turn it into a melodrama of two sides in which everything is clear on each side. And one of the things that I find so admirable about this film is how diverse this village is, and the surrounding towns. I mean, there's no single character who has the allegorical role of saying, I am Bangladesh. In fact, it's, even within his own family members have highly different views of what this moment not only means to them, but what it means to be Bangladeshi.
Right. It's really interesting that, the other side becomes the forbidden object, and everybody's drawn to that. They're drawn to the music that's coming from the other side. They're drawn to the, the boats, which are actually sort of transitions between the two sides, which is why it's so important. And I think at a larger level, this is also a film that documents the transition from tradition to modernity that the birth of the nation calls for. It's
Absolutely.
a very, very painful transition, and that's why the music is so important, because it dramatizes, expresses the pain of moving from this traditional way of life into a more modern form.
And let's stay on the music for a minute or so, because Indian or subcontinental cinema is famous. I mean, for the incorporation of music, whereas today we may use a soundtrack or whatever. The moment of musical numbers as a genre that dominates North American and European is long past, but that's not the case. But I think the use of music is a bit different here. How is he using it that would differ from the commercial Indian or Pakistani or Bangladeshi cinema?
It's a really important question, and one of the singers is actually a real singer called Manjula Begum. These are sort of itinerant baul singers who are also, drawing on a Sufi tradition. They are not, they're not associated with, commercial forms of music.
Okay.
So he's not using a playback singer. He's not using a set. He's not using extras. All the things that the commercial film industry uses. This is, he's literally taking non-actors, traditional entertainers, and putting them on film. So although this is a feature, it's very much sort of a documentary style of working.
Ah, that's interesting. So the word that I would therefore introduce is that he's not only recreating this particular moment of the past, but I would say there's even, he has this impulse to archive that. That is to, in that sense of gathering a whole set of cultural materials that define that particular moment in the history of the nation. And certainly these, certainly the musical sequences do that in two ways. I mean, one, simply the site of the performance. I mean, of it's a form of entertainment for the people in the village.
Right. Where would you go if there was no television, no cinema? Masood is deeply concerned with, capturing some of these traditional forms of entertainment. There's a wonderful moment in the film where the mother, Aisha, and the son, Anwar, who's called Anu in the film, which is a Hindu name. Again, it's very interesting. Anu is more Hindu, Anwar is more Muslim.
Right.
So it's, very syncretic. And their attraction to this music is sort of forbidden, and they have to steal away when the father is not at home. So while the cat is away, the mice will play.
No, and now you also bring up this whole question of the way in which this world is presented as an impure and mixed and a hybrid world where these boundaries are a bit fluid, or at least porous, between this. And there are those people that try to, enforce categories, and we'll come to the school in a second. But certainly, the father is one who wishes to do that. The school is a product of that. But at the same time, the brother is off having political debates that are largely secular, in nature. The mother is attracted to just the village life that includes Hindu habits as well as Muslim habits.
Right. The brother has a Hindu friend, and one of the friends that Anu has in school, Rukun, is a Hindu. And that's why, he has an aversion to meat. It's very interesting that, he is so deeply attached to Rukun. And Rukun, of course, is also a subject of, bullying. He's
Absolutely.
bullied in school. It's deeply traumatic. It's deeply traumatic for Anu to watch his friend being bullied and then subject to all forms of discrimination. And the friendships in the film, these are sort of primal categories, and they're so important to everybody. And this is, Masood drawing on his own experience of going to a madrasa, which is basically a school for Muslim children. And it's also very important to remember that this film was made before 9/11.
Very important point.
And you know, that's the point where madrasas became sort of attached to you know, Islamic fundamentalism, which is very problematic. And Masood, when he was growing up in the 50s and the 60s, was forced to attend a madrasa by his father, who was actually college educated. He went to Presidency College, which is one of the most prestigious colleges you can go to in Calcutta, but he forced his son to go to a madrasa. And this was very confusing for Masood, because you see in the film the transformation of a traditional, you know, shelter, place of learning, place of community, being appropriated by Islamic forces, by political forces. And there are many debates in the film about what a madrasa should do. And Masood, as a filmmaker, is trying to put forward this vision of a benevolent Islam, a liberal Islam, a humanistic Islam. And even the madrasa, which is now sort of, you know, been colored by all these notions of fundamentalism, terrorism, etc., is, you know, it's a mixture of many things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And no, and even in our young protagonist conversation with Rokan, he says, why don't you leave this place? And he says, well, where else do I have to go? So that whole, the contradiction of it being sheltering and bullying at this, you know, at the same time, but it, yes, it actually is in its best moments a charitable organization, if at its worst tendencies, you know, it's reductive and obviously, you know, moving in a direction of an Islamic fundamentalism that portends, you know, a future that, alas, did arrive. Let's talk a little bit, since we're on this subject, let's talk a bit about the father character, because he